meeting will now come to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ooh, thank you. It's an e-ticket, right?
Thank you. Can I have the recording secretary please take roll?
Mrs. Zaragoza.
Present.
Ms. Gates.
Present.
Ms. Sarmiento.
Present.
Ms. Benjamin Castañeda.
Present.
Ms. Dalla is absent.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the National School District Governing Board this evening. I'd like to begin by, in closed session, the Governing Board voted unanimously to issue notice to release and reassign employee number 122036 from an administrative position pursuant Education Code Section 44951, effective at the end of 2021-2022 school year, and directed superintendent or designee to send out appropriate legal notices. Thank you. Item 10, presentations. 10A is to introduce and welcome the new employees. Dr. Hernandez.
So we do have a new employee. She wasn't able to be here with us, but her name is Heather Fortune. She's a teacher of special day class, mild moderate K3 through 6 at Las Palmas School. And Ms. Fortune holds a cross-cultural language and academic development certificate, an education specialist instruction credential, and an added authorization of autism spectrum disorders. She has worked as a substitute teacher for Scoot Education Services and as a behavior interventionist for Cortica Health since 2021, and as an education specialist for the Vista Unified School District. Ms. Fortune holds a BA in General Biology from the University of California, San Diego, and an MA in Special Education from National University. And she couldn't be here today, but she did want me to let you know that she's very much likes her experience working here, and she's thankful that she was hired here.
You're welcome.
Nice.
Item 11, public communication. Public communications provides the public with an opportunity to address the board regarding an item on the agenda or other topic. Anyone wishing to address the board shall submit a request for oral communications card. Cards are available near the entrance to the boardroom and are to be submitted to the recording secretary. A member of the public who wishes to address the board on any such matters is limited to 3 minutes for one matter and up to 5 minutes for all matters. There should be a limit of 20 minutes for any matters unless such time limit is waived by the majority vote of the board. Members of the public may not yield any time to other speakers. No board action can be taken.
Do you have any speakers?
No speakers? Thank you. Item 12, agenda. 12A is to accept the agenda. Can I get a motion?
Move to accept.
Motion by Ms. Sarmiento
I second.
and a second by Ms. Isolada. Do we have any discussion? If not, please vote.
And that's 4 yes, 1 absent. Ms. Dalla.
Thank you. Item 13 is to approve consent agenda routine items of business. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be acted upon in one action by the board. It is understood that the superintendent has recommended approval for these items. There will be no discussion prior to the item, prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent agenda. All items approved by the board will be deemed as considered in full and adopted as recommended. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion? Have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Ms. Sarmiento and a second by Ms. Gage. Do we have any discussion? Please vote.
And passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 14, journal functions. At this time, I'd like to recuse myself since this item is related to myself and I don't want it to be a conflict of interest due to my absence. So Ms. Sarmiento will now take over.
Thank you. I'll wait. Thank you. The item is to adopt resolution 21-22.22 regarding the absence of board member Ms. Maria Betancourt Castaneda due to hardship/bereavement. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move to adopt the resolution, please.
I second the motion.
Motion by Ms. Gates, second by Ms. Lizarraga. Please vote.
The item passes for 3 yes, 1 recused, 1 absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sarmiento.
Thank you.
Item 14B is to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on March 9, 2022. Can I get a motion?
Go ahead.
Same time. I motion to approve the agenda for May 2nd, the minutes for item 14B.
And I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. At this time, I wanted to make a point that I will be abstaining from this item since I was not here. I was not physically here. I have reviewed the meeting, but I was not physically here to be able to vote on this item. So I will need to abstain.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any additional discussion? Please vote.
The item passes 3 yes, 1 abstained, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 14C, approve the draft National School District Governing Board meeting schedule for the 2022-2023 school year. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Please vote.
The item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Item 14D is to approve membership to the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials for Ms. Rosina Lizarraga. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. Do I have to abstain on this part because it pertains to me, or can I vote on my own? Can
You can vote.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I'm excited that you elected to join the LAO. There's so much valuable information that they provide us, and you'll definitely be able to learn a lot.
I? Thank you. After a thorough investigation and research about what they provide for us, it's just like it was a final decision. Thank you so much.
Good to hear. Okay, we have a motion and a second. If no additional discussion, please vote.
The item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 15, Educational Services. 15A is a presentation on the National School District Federal Program Monitoring Review. Dr. Kraft?
Thank you. As you know, National School District underwent federal program monitoring review over the last 2 years. In a previous board meeting, Trustee Sarmiento requested a presentation of the NSD federal program monitoring and its findings. And so I'd like to bring up the team that led the 7 areas that were reviewed for National School District to the podium, and they'll give you the presentation. Ms. Garcia, Ms. Dreyer, Ms. Hayes, Dr. O'Connor, Ms. Lawson, and Ms. Coward.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
No. Mike needs to be.
Oh, I needed the button behind the microphone. Is it to turn off?
Sneaky button. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kraft. Thank you, board members. Thank you, executive cabinet. I'm going to go ahead and start off our presentation and introduce our directors who did the heavy lifting of this work. So a quick overview. We have a lot of information on this slide. So what I decided to do is pare it down into language that's simple for us to understand. And that means all of us. So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to understand this process and what came about from it. So first of all, what is FPM? Well, this is a federal programming monitoring, and it runs through the CDE, and it's an overall determination if our district is meeting program and fiscal requirements for some categorical programs. So the next question is, what would those programs be? What are the categorical programs? We have some pretty complex titles for those, but if you look at them carefully, I can give you some stuff that you understand and know, and I understand and know. So we have Title I funds that we have to monitor, English language learner programs, any COVID funds that have come in the last couple of years, uniform complaint procedures, preschool, and fiscal monitoring. There are some instruments that are used to be able to help with that monitoring. And really what this instrument is, it's representation of federal and state requirements. And this can change year to year because the requirements change year to year. So each year, the instruments are given to us of what those requirements are, and then we follow through with that. So what happens is after we use those instruments, they have findings for us. And what do those findings mean? Well, it's really a three-parter kind of situation with those findings. First, the requirements in the program, those items the district must meet. The next is evidence which shows the district may not be meeting those requirements or not meeting them. And then finally, the steps the district may need to take to show that the district is subsequently meeting those requirements. And so once we go through those, what's the expectation for those findings? It really comes back to supporting the submitting the supporting documentation that's showing that our new systems and procedures in place to make sure those requirements are met for those instruments. So with that, I would like to introduce our team that we had an opportunity to already meet, but Dr. Wendy O'Connor will have an opportunity to talk to you about some parts. Ms. Dreyer will talk to you about some parts, Ms. Lawson, Ms. Irina Kowart, and of course, Ms. Hayes will have a chance to talk to you about each one of those programs that they oversee. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm shorter, even in my heels. Good evening, Madam President, Governing Board, Cabinet, and Dr. Brady. I had the opportunity this year to be the lead of the CE instrument, which stands for Compensatory Education. And this is particularly focused on Title I funds that we receive as a district. And the intent of those funds is to provide opportunities for our children who maybe don't get those opportunities at home because of the context that they live in, particularly low socioeconomic and so forth. So we have 20 instruments. Cece mentioned instruments. So I'm going to actually jump to the next slide so you can see the instruments. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but I was going to point out a few that you would probably recognize because they've come through board agenda items and they've been reviewed by all of you and approved this year as well as previous years. So the first one that we could look at is the first column, CE 01 and 02. And that would be indicating our district and school parent and family engagement policy. So each year we develop those at the district level and then the schools build in like, but personalized to their school. CE 06 are school site activities, particularly through our SPSA, our single plan for student achievement. And then you would also recognize CE 18, our school accountability report cards, or the SARCs. So of course there are 20 instruments, but those might be a few that help you contextualize the CE compensatory education tool. I also wanted to point out that even though I'm, the lead on this and I'm sharing this with you, it was definitely a collaborative effort for all of these tools, all of these instruments. And specifically, if you look at CE 11 and 12, that was arena. I had nothing to do with that. That's business. And I would send it to her and say, do you need my help? And, she never needed my help. She's got it. And then CE 15 would be an example of collaboration with purchasing district equipment inventory. So we worked collaboratively to gather our records from both Ed Services for technology and then purchasing for technology and other purchases that CE was looking at. And then CE 20, paraprofessional requirements. So working with our HR staff and Ms. Hernandez, Dr. Hernandez and her staff as well. So it's a collaborative effort. It was a district monitoring. So I wanted to make sure that, when we celebrate the positives, we give credit to everybody. And when we look at the findings and what we need to work on, we look at doing that collaboratively as well. So luckily, we had 0 findings in the CE compensatory education instrument, but that doesn't mean that it was just real easy. It was not easy, and there are things that we know we need to tighten up and work on as we move through the rest of this year and into the new school year. Particularly, we want to build a timeline for time-sensitive items. Specifically, the parent and family engagement policy, the school site council composition, the single plan for student achievement, the SPSA, and using the evaluation tool that the CDE provides for us to reflect on the previous year's SPSA to inform what changes would occur in the new year. Parent notifications, making sure those are sent out in a timely manner. And also the private school consultation and participation, making sure that's happening every year, kind of on a calendared event. And then finally, being able to consolidate the work that we're doing collaboratively with the purchasing department and our technology equipment and coming together and doing an inventory. And then, the subsequent work that happens after you do an inventory to see what your needs are, doing it together. And we're actually in progress on that right now. So thank you for your time. And are we taking questions at the end or?
Yeah.
That looks like
Ms. Dreyer.
Looks like me. Time to adjust the mic again. Good evening, Madam President, Governing Board, Executive Cabinet. Thank you for letting us be here with you this evening. And like Dr. O'Connor said, giving credit where credit is due, I think I entered in January at the perfect time because the majority of this work had been completed by Dr. Kraft and Jana Piper, who was our previous Director of Student Support Services. So I won't take much credit, but I will explain, or any actually, but I will explain. Again, positively, there were no findings in the uniform complaint procedure process as it was reviewed. They used 6 instruments to review these areas, which included our policies and procedures, ensuring that the district has a complaint log and tracks the complaints that do come in, completes the investigations and follows through, that we provide annual notices to our community, our students, our staff, our parents, and our community. And then we also have the Williams Act embedded in there. The plan going forward is to continue to, the process that was, that we went through before was just to review the current procedures, make sure the board policy was up to date and our documents were current and published. And so that was completed. And then the long-term resolution is to continue to at least monitor these annually and update them as necessary to maintain compliance, because we know documents change, things are updated, and we get those notifications typically from the County Office of Ed. And as those come through, we will update and keep you apprised of that process. And just to look at the instruments a little more closely, policies and procedures, that covers unlawful discrimination, harassment, intimidation, bullying. It covers our compensatory education, our categorical aid, our homeless and foster youth. So that covers a wide variety of our population. The annual notices are exactly what they say. The notices go out annually. We'll update them again as needed and things change, and we ensure that those go out to all students, parents, staff, and the public, and our employees as well. Our investigation of complaints, we do have a procedure in place for that, and we do have a 60-day timeline, much like our special ed process. So it's good. I can remember that. So when we get those complaints, we will do them in 60 days. And then we also, it covers the Williams complaint, where that is, we ensure that we have sufficient textbooks, and instructional materials, and that we have we don't have teacher vacancies where we can fill, and that we have the right people in the right jobs with the right job class. So that's part of that Williams complaint procedure. And Charmaine Lawson will talk to us about early childhood.
And I just wanted to, before you step off, Ms. Dreyer, thank you so much, but I also wanted to concur with Dr. O'Connor and make sure that everyone knew that, in addition, Ms. Hayes helped significantly while Ms. Piper was transitioning with the UCP. It was a lot of work, so I wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
I'm also shorter. Madam President, Governing Board, members of the Cabinet, thank you for having us this evening. I am always pleased and proud to talk about our programs with Preschool and brag about what we have going on there. And it's when you look at the early learning and care, the instrument has modified over the years, always adding and deleting some of the pieces. And when you see that it's got 20 instruments, you think, oh, just 20 little things, but each one of those is super cumbersome. And so I hope to highlight a little bit of that while we go through the instrument, and echoing also what Dr. O'Connor said, which is that this didn't in no way happen all by ourselves. This is a collaborative effort of our district, and all of the support of others help us all be successful in these areas, and all of the areas where we have things to keep learning because things keep changing and evolving. We all have to work on those things together. So we have, we're so excited to serve our 3 and 4-year-olds through California State Preschool Program, which is the CSPP. And when we talk about the instrument, when we all kind of refer to it, it's this document that we live by and fold and make our own different things, pieces of it. And so these are all the details of everything that come in. In addition to that, within our program, we have 2 kind of manuals that we get each year. So it's really important as we look at always for our long-term need is reading through that instrument that comes out each year, plus reading those manuals, making sure that we understand the changes, attending our county and state meetings, and making sure that we're always apprised of whatever those changes are. So I'm pleased to share that we did not have any findings within our program. And the areas that they look at I kind of broke them into the sections that they reviewed. So for ELC 1 through 6 is all about family files. So preschool is a you have to qualify. So you have to be income eligible. And so they look at all of our files to be sure that we have met all of the income qualification. They review, thank you. So they go through and make sure. And so there's some components that are not applicable to us, but most of it is they're looking to make sure that we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's, and we have met all of the requirements, which is one whole of those manuals altogether. And then they look at our attendance records, make sure that we're reporting and recording everything. And we had to load up a ton within the system. So just to do that and then answer any of those questions as they review our documents, our procedures, our policies, and then the actual attendance and documentation for that. When we look at family engagement, they wanted to see what our parent education, parent involvement offerings are. They look at our health and social services. And the nice thing within our program is that we have family liaisons, and they support our families and all that outreach for the social services. And we have a preschool nurse that is assigned and also supports and handholds our families with any of their health needs. So they look at our policy procedures for that and any the records that we have that support that. The big one is this program quality. And so there's some components where you just have to meet them. You have to have licenses, you have to make sure that they're current, that you don't, if you have any not findings, but citations, that's not the right word, but it's the same meaning. You have to make sure that you report those. We have staff to child ratios that we must meet. We have our menus, so I have to work with CNS help support us to make sure that we meet all of the requirements that the nutritional components are. The environmental rating scale, the desired results to profile and data, those are specific tools that we are trained on and we have to use within our program. The or ECRS is what we call it. Environmental rating scale is where we have, there's a book this thick that tells us how we have to set up our classrooms, what they look like. It's got 7 categories and I think it's 21 subsets for that. And we have to have that as an annual self-review for ourselves. And then we also get rated out externally for our county. And we have to have a certain score on those. And if we don't, we have to have action plans. So they review all of our records for that and our own action plans where we have that self-review. And then the desired results developmental profile, that's our data, DRDP data. That's how we evaluate our children. We make our plans. We figure out how we're going to support them and what we're going to do. And then they look at our staff development program, making sure we have qualified staff. And then that refrain from religious instruction is probably the easiest one because it's one statement in our handbook. Everyone's like, whoa, we got that one. So program quality is pretty intensive. Then when we look at administrative, same thing that they mentioned in Comp Ed, which is the inventory records. And then each year we do an annual program evaluation. And so we submit that as well for you. And then we do a self-reflection similar to the SPSA, but it's within our own program. And then the last is the fiscal audit. And I, again, turned over to Arena and I said, please. And she said, yes. And I said, thank you. So we passed that one with flying colors as well. So again, thank you for the opportunity always to speak about preschool. I'm so proud of what we're doing. And I will turn it over to Arena. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Governing Board President Betancourt Castaneda and Governing Board members and Dr. Brady and staff. I was a lead of 2 areas. First area is this one, CARES Act, CRSA Act, ARP Act monitoring, and we call this area CA. And basically this was the audit of federal stimulus funds, one-time funds we received, such as Coronavirus Relief Fund, a CRF fund, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, and also GEAR funds, which is a Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. And there were 11 program instruments, and we had 4 findings. And I wish, like previous directors, I wish we didn't have any findings in this area, but audit was so extensive and a lot of samples got pulled. And unfortunately, we had findings in 4 areas. So this is the list of all of the program instruments. There were 11 areas, and you can see, as you can see, CA01, we had a finding number 1, and CA04, finding number 2, and CA09, finding number 3, and CA11, finding number 4. So we are gonna dig deeper in those findings on next slide. So CA01, there were missing specific cost objectives on semi-annual certifications, and LEAs are required to maintain time and effort documentation that accurately reflect the work performed by federally funded employees. And we provided our time and effort documentation by the deadline, but FPM reviewer said that our documentation didn't have enough information. And one big item was missing, which was a specific cost objectives. So so that's why, and then we revised it, but we couldn't provide that document, revised document by the deadline, January 20th. So that's why this became a finding. And second one is the CA04. We failed to provide requested procurement documentation by the deadline. And procurement is the procurement is the formal process of purchasing goods and services from outside of vendors, private industries. And we couldn't provide master contract or original bid documents for 3 vendors sampled to CA reviewers by the deadline. And that's why it got listed as a finding. But we couldn't provide 3 vendors bid document because those were piggyback bids. So we needed to request from outside bid authorizers. So that was not our original bid. That's why we had to ask requests to outside agencies to provide those documents. And we unfortunately time ran out, and this became a second finding. And third one is a CA09, and we failed to provide requested documentation by the deadline. And we used coronavirus relief fund for the salaries of an employee that was budgeted already. And so basically pre-COVID, that person was doing the same thing during COVID. So that's why CA reviewer said that no changes, no additional duties added during COVID era. So that's why they said, she said, it is unallowable. So we shouldn't have charged the person's salaries and benefits to CRF funds. So that's why it became a finding. And if we could reimburse CRF funds by the deadline, it didn't become a findings, but time ran out again. And fourth last findings was CA11. And again, we failed to provide requested documentation by the deadline. And SR3 plan, CA reviewer said she couldn't locate on our website. And also SR3 stakeholders meetings attendance log, we had to submit to her. And CA reviewer couldn't reconcile some of invoice discrepancies, and we couldn't submit the supporting document to explain the discrepancies by the deadline. So that's why, again, this became a finding. So short-term, long-term need, we need to keep using the FPM approved time and effort documentation forms. So now we have approved time and effort documentation. So moving forward, we will keep using the approved form. So we won't see these findings again when they come back. And the second thing is no long-term absences of staff members. Unfortunately, we had one staff had a extended leave, and because of that person was not at work, kind of a small snowball effect. I had to help, and then my time I was pulled into that person's taking care of that person's job duties. So that's why I was supposed to start FPM, gathering all of FPM documentation and send it to FPM reviewer. But because of I had to do that person's job, so that's why everything got delayed. And again, deadline was January 20th. And if I would say one more week, these findings, shouldn't have been a finding. So next time, hopefully, we have full staff, everybody's good, healthy, and, at work, then we won't see these findings again. So, and then the second area I was lead was fiscal monitoring. And fiscal monitoring, so FPM reviewer selected samples from general ledgers payroll registers, and commercial warrant listings. And FPM reviewer made sure all of our internal control policies and procedures in place, and also all costs charged to federal programs are reasonable, necessary, and allowable. And FM reviewer, he looked at Title I, Title II, Title III LEP, and one-time federal stimulus funds. And he pulled a lot of sample expenditures from registers, and basically he requested for me to send invoices, purchase orders, contracts, bid documents. And again, I wish we didn't have any findings, but we had 2 findings. And first findings was FM01. So we needed to provide requested time and effort documentation and update time and effort policies and procedures, and provide training to staff who certifies time and effort documentation by January 20th deadline. So again, this is the same thing from program instrument CA. So we had a time and effort documentation, but the documentation did not have everything required by the federal government. So now we have, we asked them to review our document, and then they said, okay, looks good. So now we have that document containing everything requires by the federal government. So this finding you won't see this again when FPM comes back, maybe 2 years from now. And training, we couldn't provide training because we had such a short amount of window, but we actually had a training on March 3rd. So now everybody got trained who certifies time and effort documentation, which is a first-hand knowledge as supervisors. So principals and directors who got trained on March 3rd. And moving forward, we are going to train them every year. We are thinking like first quarter of every fiscal year, we are going to host training. So we make sure this won't be a finding for the next time around. The next one is the FM02. We needed to provide requested documentation by the deadline. And this was, we needed to provide emergency procurement documentation for impact teachers, time cards for last year and this year, and the journal entries to reimburse Title I for allowable costs. And again, if we had more time, this shouldn't be a findings, but unfortunately we had a deadline. And this year we had a FPM in the week of January 17th, and January 17th was a holiday. So we technically had a 1 day short. So we had 3 days to provide everything. And then not just providing everything, we just scan and upload and we explain, and then they review, and then if they have any questions or anything else they need, they respond back. So kind of like takes a little time, and then they are dedicated to audit our district for that specific week. But still, when I respond, sometimes they don't request, any information they want right away, day later, 3 hours later. So that's why it was really hard to meet the deadline. But again, if I had full staff and I could dedicate my time focusing on doing FPM stuff, then probably these 2 findings shouldn't be a findings. So short-term, long-term need, We need to provide time and effort documentation training annually, so this will happen moving forward in the first quarter of each fiscal year. And, no long-term absences of staff members. So as long as we have a full staff, I can dedicate my time to address FPM staff, so it won't happen again. So that's all my areas, and hopefully next time when I do this presentation, I would say, oh, there were no findings. So that's my goal. I will try my best to do that. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Beverly D. Hayes.
All right, good evening, Madam President, Governing Board members, Dr. Brady, and Executive Cabinet. It is my pleasure to be here to talk about English Learner. I think I've been living FPM for years. And every time you go through this, you learn more and more and more. So this program document that we keep talking about, it's like our Bible. You're highlighting, you're looking at what the description of the item is, you're looking at what they want, what the requirements are, and then you also have to look at what the evidence is required. So like Ms. Court mentioned, we upload this information into what we call CMT, which stands for the California Department of Education Monitoring Tool. And all of these evidence to meet, which need to be aligned with the requirements in this document. They don't want fluff. They want alignment with these requirements. Then they will go ahead and review them. And then after they review them, they let us know, oh, is there more information that's needed? Or is it sufficient to meet the guidelines as determined in the program instrument? So according to our document, we had 14 areas that we needed to address for English learners. And it would be nice to say that we had no findings. However, we did have 9 findings. And the findings help you to strengthen your program. And you know that we have a high number of English learners, and everything we can do to strengthen the program is absolutely necessary. So several years ago, we went through a program review, and in that program review for English learners, we determined what we were going to do. And so this review didn't want to hear what we were going to do. They wanted to see evidence. So like for EL1 and EL2, it was for ELACs and DLACs. And they just didn't want to see your agenda and see all the different items you were going to address throughout the year. They wanted the evidence that you had been doing that. They wanted your presentations. They pretty well, even though our review was in January, they pretty well wanted everything done that we needed to do for our ELACs and our DLACs. So it's a great learning opportunity to ensure that what we are doing is being aligned to the state and federal requirements. So in looking at these and in the resolution of findings, so we know that as Dr. O'Connor talked about, and again, I'm going to concur with what she said, there were lots of people involved in this. One of the items for the EL is we had to provide a listing of every single teacher and their credential. And that credential had to show that they had authorization to teach ELs. And they looked up every one of those credentials, our reviewer. We had one reviewer the first time around, and then we had another reviewer this time around, and both of them looked at each of those. And we would receive a list. Well, we're not sure that this teacher's credential meets the requirements. So we would have to go back to HR, and they would pull up more documents, and then we would have to submit those to CMT to show them that yes, it did, and here's the proof that it did. And then they would look at those, and then they would say that everything was sufficient. But there were items that we had to do that involved, Ms. Coward. There were items that we had to do that involved other staff. So this actually is a collaborative effort. But I'll take responsibility for the findings. I'm not going to say that, and the findings will help us to take a look at our program and know what we need to improve. So we know we need to come up with a timeline for our ELACs and DLACs. One of the other items was reclassification of our students, and that was in process. However, they just wanted to know, our reviewer wanted to know everything about that reclassification process. So we had to put up our materials, put up examples of what our reclassification form looked like, had to review had to send up what the teachers did, all of that. They wanted to make sure that parents were involved in that process. They don't have to approve the process that they were involved. So we had to make sure that on every single form, a parent signed that form with a hard signature. So that process, we now know what's needed, and that can be easily in place. We also know that we have to identify and assess all of our students using the initial LPAC, and then once we do that with the initial, then come the spring, we have to do the summative LPAC, and then the state has added on for our special ed students the alternate LPAC. So it used to be that school districts could do their own. We used to do VCALPS, which is from Ventura County, and we would administer that to our students that the teachers felt couldn't take the regular LPAC. And then we would use that score and determine if they were an English learner or if they were initially fluent English proficient. Well, the state wants to make sure that that's the same throughout the state. So they have come up with the alternate LPAC, and this is the first year that we'll be using it as a summative. So right now, our special day classes are taking that training so that they can administer that to their kiddos, because it's important that whoever is administering that to the children are the ones that a child knows. So we're in the process of that. We're also in the process of the summative LPAC with the goal of every student, all of our ELs will be assessed using the summative LPAC. And then it's important, as we were talking about requirements, that we're using our funds to supplement, not to supplant. So it's important that those Title III funds are being used to strengthen our program, not being used in ways that the state and the feds are saying are not allowable. So we get better every time with all of that. One of the things, it's important to evaluate everything you're doing. So our reviewer just didn't want to know that we had a process in place. They wanted to see our process for evaluating. So we had to make sure that that was in place and moving forward as we went along. I could use Ms. Cowart's excuse of not having enough time, but I don't think it matters when the review is. You feel like you've run out of time, because by that deadline, you have to have all your evidence in, and sometimes you do, and sometimes you just need their feedback before you move forward. And then one of the items that they mentioned, we have provided lots of professional development to our teachers for the past 4 years. They were so impressed with all of the professional development just for English learners for the past 4 years. However, what they wanted to know was how we were making sure at the site level that what was being presented was really being implemented. And so we now have a procedure in place to ensure that's happening. And that should be happening, that teachers don't just come and hear the PD, but that they're actually using it and implementing it, again, to support our ELs. Another area that we had to work on is ELD, English Language Development. Every student who is an EL must have daily designated ELD at an area, at a level that will improve their language proficiency. So now we have that in place. In teachers' schedules, that has just become something that we do naturally. And that was as a result of FPM. Again, we want to make sure our English learners are supported. And then we also need to make sure that many of our schools have processes for looking at and evaluating students. We have MTSS, we have RTI, but we need to make sure that specifically for our English learners, we are providing that process and calling out that process. So hopefully, maybe in 2 years, if we get selected for FPM again, all of these will be in place. Well, not hopefully, all of these will be in place and we will have 0 findings in English learners as well. All righty, I think I'm looking at face. Oh, you're ending it? Okay.
All right, so I do want to acknowledge that our educational services team, in conjunction with the other departments, have really worked hard on that collaborative process. And we also look at, and I want to kind of echo the words that Dr. Hayes says, we look at this process as not a punitive, but as an opportunity for growth and learning. So each time that FPM occurs, we look at that as tightening up our processes and procedures and making sure that we are coordinating and collaborating together as a department as well as a district. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions that you may have, and I will bring the appropriate director up to be able to address those.
And before we jump into that, I did want to just make sure they're not here tonight, but it has definitely become much more comprehensive and complex in delivery, as you heard. But and it they do the district, but they select sites, and the sites become the expectation that it's spread across the district. That's how they approach it. And Megan Young and Stephen Sanchez were instrumental, collaborative, and despite all the things going on at the schools, the quarantining and such, worked diligently to help provide the data and the evidence, and are currently starting to work on some of the systems that I'm going to be hopeful, like Ms. Hayes, that are going to be fully in place to meet the new instrument requirements. So I just wanted to make sure to give them credit.
Thank you. Ms. Sargento?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Initially, how do we get selected? Is it random?
Dr. Kraft will be able to address that.
I'm sorry.
My light doesn't work, I apologize. We are there, the school districts are placed in quadrants A, B, C, D, and they're on a cycle for being selected for FPM review, and it's usually a 3-year cycle unless they find significant findings. And if that's the case, then they will put you back in the following year. So I don't know what quadrant we are, but we're with a group of other districts that are receiving federal funds.
And how many significant findings would we need to have in order for them to come back again?
I'd have to look at what they looked at last time. I don't remember the exact number in their first initial FPM. I'd have to get back to you on that. But there were significant enough in terms, especially with our EL programming, that we were notified by the county that we were placed back on it. So I'd have to look at to get that actual number.
So we do know that they're going to be back next year?
No. This is the second year. The first year was 20. It's a blur with COVID. So it's 2020.
2019 to 2020.
It was 2019.
Right.
2019.
Our
Yeah.
review was
2020, right before
when we shut
COVID.
down.
Yeah, see, it's all blur.
Can't blame it on
And
that.
so that was the initial year in which we were selected. And then the follow-up year was the next year. We went through the process. We had an opportunity to clear. We weren't unable to clear. A lot of it was complicated by being in remote status and not being able to come to the sites. And so after that, we were notified by the county that we were going to be placed on FPM review again.
Okay, and how often do we go through this monitoring?
3 years, every 3 years.
Whether we're
You're usually on a cycle. Yeah.
on a cycle?
I mean,
Okay.
Yeah. So you're
you'll know when they're going to be coming.
Generally, yes, but I mean, they could, there could be an indication. I don't foresee that, but it's not a rule of thumb. Like they can't not come, and they could come. could decide something happened or something and decide they want to put us in a different quadrant and come the next year.
Oh, so you never know.
The fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, also, is there a chance that the federal program monitoring team may have made a mistake in their findings? Because I remember, I think it was Mrs. Hayes had said that they say they have their findings, you go back and you show them proof of whether or not there should be findings. So is there a chance that they may make mistakes, and then do they check it off the list so you don't actually have these findings in your record?
Are we allowed to say that they may have made a mistake on their end?
So they are trained and calibrated on the FPM instrument. The county was serving as a liaison for us when the delays were happening and we were during the staff shortage and such. I did make the request to begin speaking directly to the state representatives and getting clarity on what it was they needed. I don't think it was so much that what we were providing them, that they were making mistakes, is that we weren't providing them what they needed in the presentation that they needed. For example, it was much more complicated. I've been in previous FPM. For ELs, they asked for it's called a combined spreadsheet. It's an extraordinarily complicated spreadsheet that identified all of our English learners over a period of time, what their scores were, what their like scores were for students that were non-English learners. And then in addition to that, they had to follow the intervention procedure of those students. So the data demands were increased. And so it wasn't that we would give them evidence and they were saying, oh no, that's not it, and they were making a mistake. It's that we needed to present it in a manner that met the requirement.
So I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, I know we've gone through this many years, and I'm wondering, is there some sort of a template that we could follow that would help to prepare, knowing that they're going to be here every 3 years, if not more often?
Well, I think with respect to that, the FPM instrument comes out annually. And so good practice in many districts is that you utilize that FPM template and you align your work. And I know, for example, ELC was doing that. And I would cruise it for Title I. I think what happened with ELs is that right before COVID, there was a transition in the assessment and the measurements and even the metrics around English learners. And so we went from CELT to LPAC. Federal systems of evaluating English learners sunsetted, as well as California ones, and new ones emerged. You saw, I think we gave a presentation on the California dashboard. And so those things were emerging as we were preparing and transitioning. And we'd really only had, I think, a solid year of LPAC initial, and then we were moving into our second year in terms of summative, and then COVID hit. So yes, we do have the plan. We are going to be looking at the instruments. I have been talking to CDE, and one of the things that I will be bringing them is they are actually we helped them. As a result of the work that they did with us, they are actually creating a principal training for FPM, because the site piece, as I said, and that's why I wanted to give Mr. Sanchez and Ms. Young applause, is very intense. And it's very time consuming and grueling, and it's not a natural that you would do as a principal. So we'll be providing that training. We'll be, as Ms. Coward said, at the beginning of the year, not only just doing the procurement training, which, we in the timing monitoring training, but we'll also be reviewing the instruments collectively to stay on top of it. But again, we're very fortunate to have the demographics we have, but there's also a lot more compliance around them. And so it's very time consuming. So we want to make sure we pace it out and still can do our normal job.
If I could just add a quick, as you were speaking, I was thinking that this all has been exacerbated by COVID. Mm-hmm. So for example, we have a new test that we have to give and we have to do training, but nobody's allowed to be at school because everybody's home teaching in a remote environment. Mm-hmm. Then we have to test kids who are still in the remote environment and they can't come to school to be tested. So when we ask the reviewers, can we postpone our review? They say no. So we can't test those kids. If we can't test those kids, then that becomes a finding. You can't go back in time and test kids at a time that they weren't allowed to be at school and meet a deadline when that deadline's passed. Then that test is reliant on whether or not a child is able to be reclassified. So then that impacts our ability to reclassify. If we can't reclassify, then we can't monitor the reclassification of that student and have that proper form in the CUME when the FPM reviewer comes to the school, opens up the CUME drawer, picks a student, and looks for that form. And then because it was COVID, they decided they didn't want to come and expose themselves to COVID. So they asked us to do that work and go and then upload it into the CMT. Just listening to the presentation, I have to say I just have to thank the entire educational services team, Arena, you and your team, HR and your team. That was 78 instruments. And I think it was Charmaine when you showed the subcategories within each of those, and just working alongside all of you, knowing that several of those instruments took 2, 3, 4 hours just to do the initial blush, and then weeks to wait for the state. I did meet with some of the state reviewer bosses, and they said, what can we do to support National School District through this process? And I said, I don't know. What can you do to support National School District? And they didn't have an answer for me. And then I asked them, well, it would be very helpful if you could meet with National School District on a weekly basis so that we could be reviewing and discussing each of these instruments, because, as Arena was explaining, if they're not getting back to you, and by the time you figure out what they want, as Dr. Kraft was saying, you're going to miss those deadlines. So they said, oh, we don't know if we have the staff to be able to meet with you. We can't commit to that. And so I will say, Dr. Kraft, not only, as much as you heard all of the depth of each of these, Dr. Kraft also was intimately involved in all 78 of these instruments, had to monitor each one of those, and she doesn't take no for an answer. So when one of her directors or coordinators would say, I can't get the state to respond to me, Dr. Kraft was on the phone. She did get them to meet with her every week. We talked about it in cabinet every week. I think there's nobody more happy than Eric and Leticia that FPM is over, but it was a big feat to go through, and I'm just really proud of our team, and I'm just very thankful for all the work that you do, and I know that it will make us better, and I do think that the compliance is really important, but more important, the programs that help our students achieve more. And I'm sorry, Ms. Sarmiento, I did not mean to cut you off. I was just
No,
got
thank you.
excited.
You're answering my questions. And now my question, as a result, is what happens in the future? I'm guessing that there are other districts similar to ours, San Ysidro comes to mind. Would they have had the same experience that we have had? If they did it at well, I guess they didn't necessarily have it done at the same year and the follow-up during COVID and all that. But those students, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do know that districts that had similar timeframes as us, we weren't alone during the COVID piece. And we did see that districts with our demographics, with our percentages, especially of our ELs, and we do have a very high unduplicated percentage, 88%, which ties very closely to Title I. Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV funding, all of those pieces again, it's the compliance piece was huge, and districts that did have a dedicated person with that, and it really was, as you can hear, a full-time job, fared better. But I will say that, despite it all, we fared fairly well doing that and managing COVID and doing, those things. But we want to be proactive and moving forward and, recognize that many extra hours were weekends, evenings, and because the work had to get done. But in planning ahead and building those systems, I think it'll be very fruitful if we think about what will be the need. And as you were speaking, as we move forward and know that when we have our demographics, we have the conditions, we're very blessed in terms of the funding that we get, and how can we ensure that we meet those compliances and not have a phenomenon. Of course, we won't have COVID, so that will help.
So as a result, then, I would think that at the state level, they should see these patterns developing. And I'm not saying that we're all off the hook because of it, but I'm saying that there needs to be some checks and balances in place. So because this is going to happen all over the state, no matter what district they go to, they're going to find similar findings. And maybe it wasn't the exact year that COVID took effect, but it's going to be probably similar if it's near that time of year. So anyways, I'm just concerned, knowing that we've had these going on for all these years, and all of a sudden we've had all these findings, and it brought red flags, to my mind. And that's why I had requested this information, was to help me better understand where we're coming from, where we need to be, what do we do as a result. And of course, having the state involved at that level is going to be helpful as well, I would think. So I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, I think I'm next. I'm patiently waiting for it. Thank you for all those answers that I have for you. That were answered already. So thank you, because I'm as a part of the DLAC and ELAC member that I've been doing on my entire career as a volunteer. I brought that question to Ms. Hayes in one of the DPAC meetings, that the reclassification is one of my passions, to see how it progresses through the year, how it's monitored. So this is also a good understanding about what my question was back then, and it was answered correctly. And I was surprised that it was a finding and it was resolved. So I'm glad that you clarified and we went through that part. And thank you so much for that presentation. That's really helpful for us to understand that part.
Thanks. Ms. Gates?
Thank you, everybody, honestly, for all of that. Because all of that is what keeps us running, keeps us moving, and keeps us learning what is new and what's good for our kids. I do have I feel like they're basic questions on the one hand, but of course then that probably means that they're going to be a hot mess. Because one of the things, Mrs. Hayes, that you mentioned was this complete change in expectation, like with the ELAC and the DLAC meetings, from, hey, are you having them, to what exactly did you teach, like what did you do and how can you prove it? Because that also means that they aren't going to take the Google slide presentation that you have put together and go, oh, that's pretty. I'm glad that was together.
Right.
And so, so my question, I guess and you touched on it, but how do we preempt these expectations if they aren't being clear on them? Because that's a whole bait and switch piece that no matter what you do, you can't be prepared for if they turn around and completely change the expectation on us, and then put that in your lap and you sit there and go, well, what do I have to have recordings? What do I have to have? Do I have to have sign-ins? And so how do we preempt their expectations when their expectations change in a real way that, number two, means that we aren't driving our people crazy, that we are real life. Like, how in the world do we expect all of you, on top of the other things you do? I mean, Arena, we need at least 2 clones of you anytime soon now would be good if we could start on that, put that in the budget. But realistically speaking, that means we are constantly digging, demanding more of your time, your energies, our principles, in order to meet expectations that are constantly changing and getting more difficult. So where do we do the things that help us all just do this in a more sane way?
I think it is kind of the plan that we're hoping to do. This is a monitoring compliance, it's something, it's a garden you have to tend. And if you don't tend it, then the weeds grow. And I don't believe, and I don't want the impression to be wrong, that the state didn't do a bait and switch. What had happened is we had some practices in place that, they were just the way we've done things. And things evolved, things changed, things became more comprehensive. And I believe with COVID, as I shared earlier, education has changed significantly. And one of the key components is the demand of data. That's the evidence. The demand to use your technology, your systems to produce much higher levels of data requirements that because you can do it now, right? Because go back 4 or 5 years, technology has shifted dramatically. So I think the most effective system is to go and pretend as if you are an FPM. And that's what other districts have done when they've had a dedicated person. They have set up as if it's an FPM folder. When we were working, we had an FPM spreadsheet, we had an FPM folder in the drive, we had who was assigned, how it was going to be done, how it was going to be delivered, deadlines, timeframes. When things weren't happening, I'd come knocking, hey, what's going on? Oh, you mean 4 people are gone? Let me help you. I learned more about procurement than I ever wanted to know. And so that was my role. A lot of, besides getting my hands into it, was making sure that piece. And I think one of the key pieces is, again, that instrument. The UCP, you will see that, and I think I'd said that every year. Now you're going to see the family engagement policy every year. And because it changes. And there are slight nuances that you need to pay attention to, those little nuances. And for example, in the DLAC piece, we thought we had done the task, but we hadn't put the comprehensive needs assessment, and so everything else became void as a result of it. And when you looked at the finding, right, in the criteria, you said, oh, that made sense. But it was difficult, going back and forth, trying to understand. It was practice that we've done, and now this little nuance shift happened, and it took quite a bit of time to undo that shift, right? To undo what we had done and re-put it in place. But now we'll be creating a timeline, and that timeline will be attached to the FPM instrument every year.
Thank you. Well, I just would like to say thank you to everybody that had a hand in this. I know that it was not just you guys here, but you had a major role in this. So thank you to everybody. It does, it's not that it sounds that it's a lot, it obviously was a lot. And for you to present to us in a way that we were all able to understand, at least I speak for myself, I guess, I truly appreciate it. Just hearing about it doesn't do its justice until we actually saw it presented here. And I know that was more work for you guys to be able to put together to present to us, but it was valuable information that we all needed to hear, to know that you weren't just wearing the hat that you were here to, on a daily, it's all the other hats that had to be worn to complete the tasks that were required. And it's difficult time to have to do this because COVID, has its role in this, and the those that had to be in quarantine and for a variety of reasons. So, I understand, having to wear multiple hats, and that I'm sure that goes for everybody, but I truly appreciate it. And I hope that going forward, it's not as intensive, because like Ms. Hayes says, we're learning from this. And going forward, we don't have to go through all the COVID restrictions and so on that made it so much more difficult for us to have these processes in place and so on and so forth. One question I do have though is, why is it that we have to deal with the state on a federal program? Is that something that Anyone else?
Yeah.
Wait, we're kidding, I'm kidding. Pretend. Go ahead.
It is all tied to federal program and monies, and as you saw. But what happens is each state, under Every Student Succeeds Act, has to write a plan, an ESSA plan, and that gets approved by the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education. And embedded within that is that you promise to uphold, obviously, the intent behind the funding, but that you would also kind of have a satellite group that would work to ensure that your state, within the regulations you have, is meeting the ESSA plan that you submitted to the federal government. And so that's what this group is. Even though they come from CDE, they are trained in terms of the categorical funds and trained in terms of the ESSA funds so that the state can continue to apply for those funds. And I wanted to say one last thing. I don't want to be remiss when I was talking about all the data. Oscar Gill was instrumental also. He was happy not to hear FPM again.
I was gonna say, everybody's probably happy that we're at this point. I wouldn't say we're done because it's gonna continue, but we've gotten to the point where we can breathe and start maybe having some normal days that we can hopefully move forward. But again, yeah, there's a lot of work done behind the scenes that we probably will miss a few people that have not been acknowledged here. But I truly thank everybody for all their hard work. So thank you once again for everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to move on to item 15B, to approve the purchase of a digital subscription renewal for Panorama Education Inc. for all National School District sites from April 22nd, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion and I get a second.
I've got a second with a question.
We have a motion and a second with discussion. Okay.
Subscription cost versus annual cost on there. I'm just wondering what the difference is. $7,583.33 is the difference, but why is there a difference between the two numbers?
I believe it covers a prorated period of time.
Okay,
Yeah, from April 22nd to June, and then June to June.
okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? If none, please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Gates. Item 15C is to approve contract CT 3925 with Imaging Creative Services LLC to provide SAFA's Story, an interactive theater forum for Lincoln Acres School 5th grade students. Can I get a motion?
I motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, just to correct, it's SAFA's Story.
SAFA's Story.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Please vote.
Yes, please.
Your light's on.
Sorry.
That's all right. I will say, first, I need to abstain from this because the director is a personal friend. But I will also say that this is a very interactive theater program on not only bullying, but honoring heritage, honoring where kids come from. And it's presented in a way that actually the kids will get to watch, and then they're gonna do it all again and get to interrupt. And if that's not the most fun thing for 5th graders to be able to do, to actually stop a story and interrupt and tell you how you should have done it, it'll be a unique experience for them to actually step in and correct the ugly that can happen when you pick on somebody else. But at the same time. I'll be abstaining from this.
I'd like to see if we can maybe get some interest from other schools, because we probably can, our other schools can benefit from this. So if we can maybe get the dates, I don't see, will be provided on the 15th. If we can be included on the invitation if something's out there, so that way we can, I'd like to visit it, be a part of it, and really promote it if this is something that other schools can definitely, take advantage of. Thank you. Do we have any additional discussion? Please vote.
Karen passes 3 yes, 1 abstain, and 1 absent.
Item 15D is to approve contract CT 3927 with Fleet Science Center to provide assemblies for students at all schools. Can I get a motion?
I will make that motion to approve that contract.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? I just like to say, I'd like to see the financial impact of zero. So, please vote.
Karen passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 15E is to approve contract CT 3928 with Lexia Learning Systems LLC in National School District for the 2021-2022 school year. Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion to approve the contract.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes, I would like to see what is a pilot program for. Because this is something we're gonna establish, so the one in a pilot program in a school, and I mean, in a district.
Oh, it does.
Yes, so our adopted ELD curriculum is the benchmark, but this would be a supplemental program to help teachers reinforce and have personalized learning paths for designated ELD. So it'll run very similar to iReady. There'll be a diagnostic. It's unique. It's one of the few programs that we've seen out there. And it'll do an assessment of English language development. And there is an oral speaking component to it. And then it'll put as a result of it, it'll put a pathway for the students to have these designated ELD moments. It's not going to replace the teacher. We do still expect designated ELD to happen in the classroom as expected by the ELA ELD framework. And of course, integrated ELD, there's a great deal of professional development being done by our DRTs doing that. But this will enhance and supplement and help to accelerate academic language for our students. And so the pilot program will focus on bringing in some teachers to test it out. I've had the opportunity to work with Lexia before in the literacy program. I know what it's capable of. I know how it does support teachers. So we were able to get pilot licenses at no cost, but there will be a cost if we decide to move forward. We do need to make sure the teachers are trained, and so that is the cost you're seeing, because we won't be able to evaluate the program if the teachers aren't properly trained. And then we're going to ask for teachers to pilot and to provide us feedback. And depending on that feedback, if that is something we will do, then I will go through the procedures of bringing it through the necessary protocol in order to bring it as a supplemental for our teachers to have.
For the whole school year following, right? Okay.
Next year, and for all teachers, because we have ELs and everyone, and it helps, and it'll help all levels of English learners, because it's going to be personalized.
The time frame on that you put on the agenda is like from now until the end of the school year, and so we're going to see what the results are for. Okay. Thank you so much for the clarification.
You're welcome, and I'll provide updates, Trustee Lizette.
Thank you. So the pilot is from now to the end of the school year. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any additional discussion? Okay, please vote.
Karen passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 15F is to approve contract CT 3930 with the Stepping Stones Group to provide specialized academic services for the 2021-2022 school year. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have? Ms. Gaines?
I have, yes, all of these positions fall under certificated spots. And I know that one of the things that we're trying to buffer is when we can't find people to fill those spots. I understand that. I'm still going to ask the question of to what extent does this impact our certificated staff? How many is this supposed to be just kind of a sub thing, or is this like a longer term? And at what larger concern is how much are we outsourcing our certificated positions?
The only time we outsource is if it's a very specialized position that we don't have. Unfortunately, we still have an RSP position that has been unfilled all year. As soon as I hired the RSP position, we actually had an RSP get a promotion and he will be moving to another school district. So that's the specialized educational services that we need. So we aren't subbing. It's just that we can't find the positions, the people for those positions. But if we could find and have all our positions complete, we wouldn't be needing to outsource at this time. It is just that we are also with our independent study, because we have an independent study program, we did post for these positions and we also were not able to fill them. So that's why we are needing to outsource. Our preference is not to outsource. Our preference is definitely to have our certificated employees be ours. But as much as we post and interview, then by that time, they sometimes they already even say yes to us. They come to the paperwork, they come to the board, and then on that day they decline. So we just have had a difficult time with these services.
Okay, and one of my other questions is, we have this $103 per hour. I don't get paid $103 per hour.
It's not to exceed it. That's the limit, isn't it?
Yes,
That's why
but that limit is really high.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't get paid $103 an hour. So I understand that would be some built-in administrative costs. That's feels really high for certificated personnel, even with administrative costs for the company built in.
Yes, I mean, in normal times, often we would have contracts for typical leaves. We've never seen the situation we have, and we just simply don't have the bodies to meet the IEP demands. And so we have contracts out currently with other companies, and we just called one today because we have two positions that will be vacated at very intense sites because of the consultant piece. And we called them and their response is, we don't have anybody. And so we bring this forward because we have to find individuals that can provide the services that we need to students with their IEPs. And, you know, there's still the typical piece, like people take leaves because they have children and they need to do that. And the problem is we don't have somebody to backfill them, and the specialized work they do has a very litigious result. If not to mention the fact that those students are entitled to those services, but they have a set amount and you only have so much time before you are no longer in compliance with the IEP. And so I've been talking to the SELPA. I had a conversation with the SELPA director this morning, and I basically said, help us
to find individuals so that we can get through to the end of the year. And hopefully next year it'll be more similar to what more typical years are. This is a company, Stepping Stone, and I believe they're larger. We started looking into some of the larger companies in hopes that they would actually have a pool. When you asked about the implication with the staff, one of my concerns is that if we aren't able to fill, then we have to distribute that work. And our staff are working at a very, high rate. And so, and we also have caseload limits with that. And so those factors come into play when we have to ultimately meet the IEP need. And so,
My last connected question is this. Is there a requirement to make sure they are providing us with a consistent person, that this is not just a random, like every other day I get a new person in? Because, part of the concern also is, what we're looking for is people who are committed to us and ours. Looking for those full-time positions that aren't getting filled right now. But that also means we can't have somebody working on an IEP today, and then you're the person tomorrow, and you're the person the next day, and then it's back to me, and then it's, so is this a consistent commitment from them to stay and be with us until, for the duration?
So we of course asked for consistency with that, but within the contracts, they as well as we have the ability to determine whether it's working or not. We've actually had that situation. We do work with companies that have been vetted, and the CDE certifies the individuals that are working there. In terms of time commitment, we ask for longer periods. For example, if somebody's going to be out for leave, maybe, that's a 6 to 8 week window. We plan for that. Then they say, oh, no, I can't come back. And so even though the staff person is committed, because that's what we initially said, because that's all we can say, then we have to ask if we can extend it. And sometimes they've been committed to something else because of things that are unforeseen. So we do try to secure somebody and to do it longer as we can, and we try to be upfront. But again, with the agency pieces, a lot of times people work in agencies because they want the flexibility. And, because as we know, special education it's got great job security, right? And so it's can be very challenging to fill at times. And we want to make sure we put the best in front of our kids too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just curious, seeing that it's $103 an hour, does this mean that they may send us someone for a 40-hour work week, which means we're paying a bunch of money to this person? And I see that it says here the not to exceed $200,000, and I like how it says services satisfactorily rendered. But I'm just wondering how, if they get to that $200,000 mark, then we don't pay anymore, right? That's how it should work. Okay. But we may use them for less hours, is that correct? So it all depends on how many IEPs we need to have done, and if they're done satisfactorily and all that stuff.
And I think also dependent on the individual, so it can be up to. So, depending on maybe somebody that has particular needs, autism certificate, specialty with, a behavioral component, may be able to fetch a higher amount than, just a typical psychologist. I'm just giving that as an example. I don't know if this is the case. And so depending on that, but when we approve up to 200,000, we believe if we were able to gather somebody, that would bring us to the end of the year to maintain what Trustee Gates was saying, that continuity.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If no additional discussion, please vote.
The item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 15G is to approve contract CT 3931 with Native Interpreting to provide interpreter and translation services, which is what I need today. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I second the question. Is this gonna be to cover the interpretation needs from the, knowing that one of the interpreters resigned? If that's because of the need that?
Yes, so currently we have the position, it's closed. So now it's interviewing the candidates. So in the time in between, we interview the candidates and find a candidate and send them to board. We just need those interpretation services.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 16, Human Resources, we have none. Item 17, Business Services. Item 17A is to approve agreement CT 3934 with You and Me Too, Inc. for access to software and devices to track school buses. Can I get a motion?
So moved with discussion.
And a second?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second in discussion, Ms. Sarmiento.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit of a understanding on how this works.
So currently we have GPS devices on all our school buses that we purchased years ago from a company called Zonar, and they work with a wireless signal. So the wireless signal on these devices use the 3G wavelengths. Well, 3G is no longer supported. There's no bandwidth. So Zonar approached us to upgrade these devices. We looked at what's out there in the market as far as competition for Zonar, and we found You and Me Too. The brand they have is called Spot My Bus. So they provide the device that works on 4G or 4G LTE wavelengths or bandwidth. And these devices also are incorporated into an app that parents can download on their phones, and they could track a school bus. They'll need a code, of course. If it's not open, you have to have a code that they'll provide to you if you have a student on a bus. So basically, these are just GPS devices on a school bus. They tell us in the district office, where is the school bus? We could locate them, but also give the parents an ability to do that as well. And these devices are actually at a lower cost, and the service is at a lower cost than Zonar would have been.
Thank you.
What other districts that are you familiar with any other districts in our area that use the same service?
Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm positive I discussed this with Candy, our director, but I just cannot recall. But they are nationwide. So I believe they're based in Pennsylvania, but this is a company that does business throughout the country.
Is it something that you can come back to us and do a presentation, show us a demo just to see, so like how parents would be able to track their children, how the districts we would see from our end as well?
Definitely. Once we have these devices installed, we can do a demo. I could download the app and try to cast it on the TV, and maybe Candy can drive a bus around.
We'll have a video on the bus.
But once we have the devices in hand and install them, we'll be able to actually follow using their software, and it'll help us in the sense that we depend on that data on a real-time basis, but also to do our routes and whatnot. But once we have it installed and up and running, we definitely can do a demo.
I think it's a lot of peace of mind for our parents to know that we're able to at least know where they're at and track them, so that way heaven forbid, we misplace a student or a student is unaccounted for, we will be able to know exactly where they're at. So oftentimes, sometimes there's a cross in communication and for them to be able to know exactly where their child is, it just makes it that much more reassuring that we know where our kids are at.
Absolutely, and also, those are some of the calls we get, and there's things that are out of our control, like traffic or street closures and whatnot. But also, staff will be able to see where the bus is. So, we have staff waiting with the students for pickup or drop off. They'll be able to see where the buses are. So, this is information. Sometimes we have information overload, but this is information we currently don't have, but will be extremely helpful for all parties involved.
Right, and for us to be able to know how it works, I think it would be helpful when parents were to ask us any questions. We would be familiar with the capability, and this is actually a benefit that we would be able to provide our families.
Definitely, maybe look into a demo video. Anyone could take a look at and set it up. I looked at the app earlier today. I don't have a student on a bus right now, so I wasn't able to log in. But it seems they tried to make it as easy to use with the easy user interface as possible.
Good.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. It's very worrisome not to know where your child is. And I think we addressed several situations on the past, and this is awesome. Thank you for bringing it up. But the question is in regard financially. I know you put a contract for $13,000, but the subsequent years for the contract will be less, right? So can you please explain why that changes that? It's upfront, and then every year it's going to be at one price, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the first year we're paying for the actual devices,
Okay.
and then after that it's just a subscription service for a monthly fee for the devices to work. So each device is $29 a month. We have 12 buses. So the first year is just we pay the device off. So we pay for it, we own it, and then it's just like any other cell service. You pay for the connection.
Okay.
So that's the annual cost for that, plus the access to the software.
Sure, that includes guarantee, replacement, warranty, guarantee that might increase the cost. I don't know, just a question about that. That might increase the cost is expected from these devices.
I could look into that. I'm not sure. Just like any other electronic device, usually there's a 1-year manufacturer warranty. But beyond that, because it is in a bus, the buses are constantly moving.
Okay.
It can fail. I can guarantee at least we'll have 1 unit fail within 3 years. But the cost of these devices plus the monthly cost of it compared to what we were paying does make up the difference if we were to have to replace a few or 1 or 2 over 3 years. But we could look into what the warranty is.
Okay. It was not here on the number 14, so that's why I'm questioning. Thank you.
To piggyback on that, if we were to have an issue with something failing, how fast would we be able to get a replacement to ensure that there's no interruption in the service to our families?
Usually these devices are available off the shelf, so meaning it's somewhere in a warehouse somewhere, so if necessary we can have it overnighted. We generally, technology changes all the time, so the devices we have on our buses right now are obsolete, so we wouldn't really want to carry too many of these in stock just because of that fear of going obsolete, but these are off-the-shelf products that are available widely. Things can change, of course, in the future in terms of availability, but our ability to replace a unit within a working day shouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Thank you for bringing back that question.
My question, actually, you touched on it a bit, but you said you were not able to access the app. How do they make sure that this is not something that anybody can kind of find where our buses are at? Like, what is the security for, I mean, I realize they're big and yellow and people can see them, but knowing that my child is on one, not everybody's gonna find out that my child is on one, whoever wants to. How do they do their best to make sure security is handled?
So basically, if you have a student on a bus that's assigned to a route, you're given a code. And when you access the app, you enter that code, and that's the bus that the app will follow. If you have multiple students on different routes, you could follow multiple buses on your app with the different codes. But you cannot, basically the code dictates the route that you are able to see.
And is there a limit on how many people can access that code? Kind of like Netflix is wanting to make a limit on how many people use my Netflix account. It's my example, but I'm not trying to be totally facetious here. I would want to know that I have my code and that even that my spouse has to have a separate code or something to that effect, so that I don't have 7 people now who know my code, like the kids with their passwords on their computers. We want to be able to make sure that that's limited. So how do we make sure it's limited?
So generally, we would encourage people not to share their codes.
That's not an answer.
That's not an answer.
But as far as what the security around that is it's really, you can't get the code unless you have an assigned route. So the only way that someone else could use that code in their app to follow that bus would be if they somehow got it from the person. So as far as sharing the code, I don't know what the protocols are through the company, but you will not get access to that code unless you have a student and you're provided that code. There's no other way to get that code, basically.
And if something, for instance, because we know these things happen, if something changed in my family dynamic, for instance, and can people be removed from the system? Would we have
Coaching.
Well, for the example, for instance, my husband got custody of my children and I was not allowed to. Do we have communication with the company in a way that he gets a fresh code and mine's eliminated? Things like that just watch out for our kids. Do they have steps like that in place?
So the company is very easy to get a hold of in terms of their customer service. It's a small business and they operate throughout the country and they've been very responsive. So just like we do now, if there's a custody issue or custody changes, we're informed in transportation, so we know when we're dropping off a student, who we're dropping off the student to. Just like that, we would depend on the school to inform us. But as far as revoking access, it wouldn't be an issue. We would just have to inform the company to revoke the access for that app or for that route for that person. They own the software, they maintain the software. It's not, they're not like a middleman. They own it. They completely have complete control over it, so to speak. So if we were to have a change in access for someone, they'd be very responsive in terms of granting our change request.
Okay, thank you. I feel like that's an important piece to know. I appreciate it.
And I had a similar question. I remember several years ago where a set of twin boys, had come back from 6th grade camp, and the mom was there to pick them up. The dad was there to pick them up. The dad did not have custody. The mom's beating on the dad with her high heel, and the poor kids are sitting in the back of her car sweating because she had the windows rolled up and didn't want the dad to have access to them. But things like that, where we need to be able to make those changes and make them quickly, because a custody agreement is something that happens maybe in the morning in court, and by that afternoon, you want to make sure it's implemented and that the other parent isn't doing anything irresponsible. But I'm glad to hear that they're going to be on top of things with that. And wouldn't we have the ability at our level to change any access codes? I'm sure we would have the numbers on file, the code numbers, and for each individual student and their parents.
We wouldn't have access to the actual software. They manage the software.
So we couldn't ourselves change or not give someone access or withdraw their access. You
Correct.
would have to contact the company for that.
Correct. They control that entire function.
All right.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. If no additional discussion, please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 17B, accept donations. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
I second it.
Do you have any discussion?
Just a thank you for the generous donation for the sixth graders and all of them.
Absolutely.
I just would like to also say, thank you for all the donations. I know that there was several donors to this first item through a GoFundMe. And I'm familiar with this family in particular. He is always one to go above and beyond for our students. And his daughter and his son-in-law are always so eager to, to help in any way, shape, or form. My children had the opportunity to, one of my sons had an opportunity to attend school with their son, and it was always, whatever it takes for these kids. So thank you to the family for all their donations, because it was a collective thing with our students in the community. So with that, please vote.
Item passes 4 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 18 is our board and cabinet communications. Ms. Lizarraga.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to welcome our new employee, Mrs. Fortune. So I was impressed about his curriculum, and we will be glad to have her as an employee and share her expertise with us, especially on the special ed component. I'd like to thank you for all this, Rolly. On top of everything you did, you're here with us still. And thank you so much for the effort and clarification for the questions and for resolving, because we're resolvers, not people who does not action with action stepping and how we're going to move forward with this. And I'm glad that we got that clarification from what this Rolly report, that you might see a little bit and put on slides. It looks like no effort, but it was a lot of effort. Thank you so much for that. It helps a lot to understand. And I just want to wish everybody a good night, and it was a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gates.
I agree. Thank you very much for the labor of love and care that you put into for the federal program monitoring, because it's not sitting and looking at, looking at sweet faces, and yet it is for every one of those sweet faces that you worked through that. So thank you for your commitment to each of our students. I wanted to point out a couple things. April is Autism Awareness Month, and we each, I'm sure, have someone in our lives for whom that is something that they're learning more about every day as they live every day. And my hope and prayer is that we are also working to learn and honor and appreciate those with us who autism is part of their lives, part of who they are. It's also the month of the military child, and we have a number of those in our schools. And so for our kids out there who are sharing a parent with the nation, we just want to let you know as well that we appreciate it. It's hard. And not only that, but you can talk to people about it. There are people for whom it matters that your parent is maybe not at home because they're doing something for the country and for all of us instead. A big yay for sixth grade camp. A big no thank you to Mrs. Wirt, who actually sent me a picture of the backs of kids getting onto the sixth grade camp bus. Well, I can't take my kids to sixth grade camp So thank you, Mrs. Work, for the picture, but rubbing it in isn't nice. And then my last shout out, my youngest, Michaela. Remember her, Mrs. Hayes? Like that little the little thing? Yes. Turned 18 on Sunday. So I officially have no more minor children at my house. So that's a Gloria and a hallelujah, yes, for me. But thank you for the meeting tonight, and thank you for so many things that you've answered and having your patience with us as we are learning and making decisions.
This meeting. I can't say that I'm as eloquent as Ms. Gates here, but I concur with your thoughts and agree with what you're saying. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Venetians?
So last week I had the opportunity to go to Ira Harbison to see off the 6th grade camp. I had the opportunity to spend some time with Miss Amy Wirt and Christina Quiroga. It was great to see. The kids are extremely excited to go to camp, and the families were extremely high in anxiety. But it was a great thing to see. The teachers put so much effort into getting ready and making sure everything's prepared and making sure the kids have everything they need. So I just want to thank them for that opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Fernandez?
Yes, I'd like to thank the FPM team. I know how hard they've been working, so really appreciate it. I think I'd also like to thank our school administrators because every day they are there early, they're there late, they're always working so hard for our students, especially with 6th grade camp. They have gone above and beyond as well to support all of the students going at camp, so we really do appreciate them.
Dr. Kraft?
I could do what Trustee Sarmiento's did, say I concur with Dr. Hernandez, but I do. And just thank you to the presenters and to everyone who made FPM complete. And we're thrilled. I'm sorry, Trustee Gates, but we're absolutely thrilled that the kids are up at 6th grade camp. And we have one more batch, and they'll go through the testing on Friday, and then we'll say goodbye to them on Monday. So good night.
Dr. Brady?
Yes, I concur. Congratulations and thank you from the bottom of my heart to the FPM team and the leads. So much work went into that, so many days, so many hours, so many weekends. And I do think you did it justice in such a short amount of time, but I don't think anyone really knows the feeling if they don't go through it themselves. And I want you to know how proud we are of the entire team, and to Dr. Kraft for your leadership in that effort as well, because we know you're on the FPM team with everybody else. I wanted to say congratulations to our board president, Maria Betancourt Castañeda, for your appointment to CSBA delegate for another term, a full term this time. So I just wanted to say congratulations to you for that. This is the week of the young child, and I'm so excited to join Charmaine and her team tomorrow. I will be reading a book. I will be unveiling my art project and spending some time with some preschoolers, and I cannot wait. That's a highlight of my year, so I'm looking forward to that. If anybody wants the link, just let us know, and we'll make sure it should be in maybe in the bulletin. If it's not, we'll get the link to you if you're able to join us. But the time is in the bulletin in my memo for sure. Thank you to Jocelyn and Vanessa who have helped to make our exhibit, our now and then exhibit, come to life. All the clerical behind the scenes making of the posters, printing out the little cards, making the QR codes. Thank you to Nathan Bland who went out to the school sites and filmed our students reading each of the posters They are now on exhibit at Olivewood and Rancho, and we'll spend the next 5 weeks or so rotating the 2 sets from each school, and it will end up at the public library on May 19th. It's a Thursday. We hope you'll block that day on your calendar at 4 o'clock. We will have a private reception for all of the students, our English and our Spanish students that participated. They're my student roundtable and our Kimball 6th graders. And then we will unveil the exhibit at the local library. It will stay on exhibit for about a month, and then it will live in the historical room at the library. I also want to thank Angelica Benitez for her work in leading our registration fairs. We know that you only register once a year, and to have to go online and do the app, she had a great idea this year to actually invite parents to campus and walk through that process with parents. And so for everybody involved in that will be helping Angelica, thank you in advance. We're very excited. And then I'd like to just end by saying happy birthday to Michaela Gates.
Well, I would also like to say happy birthday to Michaela. Hopefully she has had a wonderful birthday. Also, welcome to our new employee. Very impressive resume. And thank you again. I know I've said it and we've said it over and over, but I really want to say thank you yet again for all the hard work that was put into the FPM, and Dr. Kraft for your leadership as well. I just don't understand how you guys are still sitting here alive, because it just sounded like there was no time for sleep, eat, anything. But thank you, and hopefully you guys will now be able to have a great night rest and come back refreshed in a couple of days. I know it's not going to be overnight, but but again, thank you, and for those who are viewing us live stream and had a part of it, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Brady, for your continued commitment in the state of the district. We're on the home stretch. Yes, we're at I know we have more, but thank you. And I apologize for me not being able to attend every single one like I had. I know it's a lot of work, and I know when my first ask of this was, a major commitment. But it is very much necessary for our families to see all the good that our district is offering. And thank you for that. And wanted to say happy Easter to everyone, and have a wonderful night. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.